BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Laverne here. We're taking our summer break, so until we're back on air, we're showcasing a few programmes from our archive. As usual, the music's been shortened for rights reasons. This week's guest is the diver Tom Daley. He was the very first person I cast away in September 2018, and it's an absolute pleasure to listen back to this, knowing that he is now an Olympic gold medalist. At just 24, my guest today is one of our younger castaways. However, his age belies his experience. He has already amassed more than one lifetime's worth of achievements. And who better than a diver to fit a lot into a short space of time? Anyone who can squeeze 3.5 somersaults plus a twist into the 1.9 seconds between leaving the 10-metre board and hitting the water below at over 30 miles per hour knows how to make the most of every moment. Tom Daley first learned to dive at 7. By 10, he was a prodigy, the youngest ever under-18 UK champion. At 14, he represented Britain at the Beijing Olympics. 10 years later, he is a 2-time world champion and also has 4 Commonwealth golds and 2 Olympic bronze medals in his trophy cabinet. Frequently described as mature, he's had to do his growing up in public, dealing with bullies at school, losing his beloved dad Rob just a year before the London 2012 Olympics. His relationship with his husband Lance and the arrival of their son Robbie Ray have all been front page news. And with the Tokyo Olympics in 2020 next on the horizon, the scrutiny and expectation aren't letting up anytime soon. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
I want to start at the edge of the 10-metre board. Now, we all have those edge of the diving board moments in life, but for most of us, of course, they are metaphorical, the moment before we make some kind of figurative leap. I want you to talk me through your literal version. What's it like standing up there, staring down at that little sparkling blue square of water?
It is terrifying. And I remember the first time that I went up onto the 10-metre platform, and I was about 8 years old. And I felt like I literally had to crawl on my hands and knees to the edge, because it feels like when you're that high up, it feels like the diving board narrows and narrows and narrows, almost like you're on a balancing beam that you could fall off at any moment. So I figured that getting my centre of gravity as low as possible to the diving board was going to be the safest bet for me. But when you stand up there, there's this overwhelming feeling of adrenaline, and all of your senses are completely heightened, and you become so hyper vigilant to everything that's going on around you, the light, the noises. It's a really weird, almost out of body experience to stand up there, because if you actually think about what you're doing, no sane-minded human would jump, we would actually do it. So you have to really be in the moment and focus on process.
And you dive with your eyes open,
yes,
which I found fascinating. Does everyone? Is that unusual?
Yeah, so just like a ballet dancer might, pirouette and spot a wall as they're spinning, we do exactly the same thing, but with the water. So if we don't know which way's up and where we are in the air, there's no chance really of landing vertical in the water. So yeah, you have to learn to dive with your eyes open and shut them just before you hit the water so that you don't get an eye full of water.
And what about landing? I mean, I know obviously it can hurt when it goes wrong, but what about when it goes right?
It hurts when it goes wrong and when it goes right, if I'm being completely honest. Obviously, it hurts a lot more if it goes wrong. I've broken ribs, coughed up blood, instant bruising. Some people even split skin when they hit the water, spinning at the right speed and at the wrong angle. Whereas when you hit the water vertical, all of the pressure and all of the impacts goes from the palms of your hands through to your shoulders, through your triceps, through your back. And sometimes when you hit the water and you have the cleanest of entries, when you have that rip entry and all the splash gets sucked under, that impact goes like pretty hard through your shoulders and your spine. So after a while, it's definitely a young man's sport.
So the rip it sounds like a piece of paper
tearing. Exactly. The aim is to, when you hit the water, you split your hands as fast as you can, and it creates a vacuum that sucks under the water so that you don't have the big, cannonball effect.
And tell me a little bit more about the sensory experience, because, you said that it is this very kind of heightened experience to dive. And I read that sometimes while you're in the air, you can actually feel like you have quite a lot of time.
Yeah, it's this weird thing. You have to make so many decisions in fractions of seconds. So it almost feels like everything goes into slow motion. Like in a Matrix movie, all of a sudden everything slows down and you have so much more control than you actually could ever imagine. And when I take off and I jump into the air and I'm spinning, I see so much and my brain comprehends so much that I can't imagine it being only 1.8, 1.9 seconds.
Now, I'm going to cast you away. Yeah. And I know that some listeners are going to be hearing this thinking that you must be a very strong swimmer and that you will escape from the island in 10 minutes flat. Are they right? Would you try?
I'm not that strong a swimmer. Believe it or not, I can swim to the edge of the pool, but doing like a 50-metre length of a pool, I am absolutely knackered by the end of it. I'd prefer to be out of the water and diving into it rather than swimming in it.
OK, let's get to your track choices. Why is this one of your 8?
Well, this is one of my 8 choices, mainly because it resonated with me so strongly in the build-up to London 2012. A song that still to this day puts goosebumps on my arms and on the back of my neck, and just thinking about how I was feeling going into London 2012 and how much I wanted to make my friends, my family and my country proud.
That was Heather Small singing Proud. Tom Daley were born in 1994 in Plymouth to Debbie and Rob, and when you arrived, the midwife declared that you were a water baby.
Yes, my mum was telling me that apparently because I had such big hands and feet, that the midwife was like, oh, this one's definitely going to be a water baby.
Really?
And yeah.
Big hands, big feet, is that a good thing?
I think it's good for balance. So I've noticed with diving, and I feel like I should have been taller than I am. I feel like maybe sport stunted my growth in some way, maybe.
But you're tall for a diver, aren't you?
I'm tall for a diver. I'm just under 5'10". Most of the divers I compete against are like 5'4", even 5'3", maybe 5'5". But big hands help with balance when I'm doing my handstand, and then big feet help with being able to stand right up on my tiptoes on the edge of the diving board. I feel like I'm secure and have a good base to stand on.
So your mum and dad were quite young parents, weren't they? What was family life like?
I only have amazing memories from growing up down in Plymouth with my mum and dad, and they were so awesome all the time. And, it's really, I now realise, being a parent, how supportive my family were and how different they were to lots of other sporting families that I've come to know. Because my mum and dad were supportive, they were never pushy, and if anything, I was the pushy child trying to get everyone out the door quick enough for me to get to the diving pool and being able to get to training. And just being able to be surrounded by such love and, support every single day makes me feel so incredibly lucky.
So that's a perspective that you've come to recently. Tell me a little bit more about that, looking back and maybe thinking again about the sacrifices that they've made.
Yeah, I mean, my dad used to work as hard as he could to be able to pay for me to be able to go to training and go to all these competitions that I had to go to in the very beginning, sacrificing all of his evenings to come and sit and watch me train and just spend hours and hours at the pool for me to do something that I love doing.
You do have 2 younger brothers.
Yes.
What were the dynamics between the 3 of you like?
Well, we were all very sporty. I mean, there's lots of banter, put it this way. Like, for example, when I won bronze in London, my brothers, the first thing they came up to me and they're like, haha, third place. And I'm like, okay, thank you.
Reassuringly normal sibling dynamics then.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are all very competitive.
And how would you describe yourself when you were little? What were you like? What did you like doing?
Apparently I was very driven and knew what I wanted, and quite a creative kid. I loved to draw, loved to, cut things up and stick things back together. And in our garage, my dad built this little seat with like a work table, if you like, and had all of these different shelves which had different coloured pieces of paper, different kinds of glues, glitters and stickers. I just used to spend hours in there at the weekend, in the evenings, just creating something or another.
Would this be the garage that later would become home to his collection of press clippings?
Yes, exactly. My dad absolutely loved to keep press clippings, whether it was an online article or a newspaper article. He would collect one copy of the actual thing, so he would keep it in like a little plastic wallet, and then he would laminate a copy. So we always had 2 copies of everything, so that one was a bit more robust to be able to get out and have a look while keeping the original. And he ended up doing that for all the way up until he passed away. Yeah, now looking back on it, it's like a lot of hard work and effort that went into creating those folders.
You were a very confident swimmer from a young age, but when did you first become interested in diving itself?
Yeah, I just loved being in the water. I loved going to water parks. And one Saturday, my dad took us me and my brothers, to a Saturday fun session at the pool. It was a different pool that I'd been learning to swim in, and I saw people diving off the diving boards, and I was like, whoa, that looks fun. And then, the next week on the Saturday morning, I went to the diving pool and I started diving myself. So it was just by luck that we have the facilities there to be able to do it in the first place.
Tell me about your second disc.
My second disc, well, I used to dress up as Elvis, as a bit of inspiration from my dad, who also used to dress up as Elvis. We used to go camping every weekend down at Watergate Bay near Newquay. And my dad would literally go to the caravan and he'd dress up in his full Elvis jumpsuit, glasses, wig, you name it, he had it. And he got me to start doing it because he was like, why don't you just do some karaoke? It's fun, sing whatever you like. And I started off singing S Club 7, Reach for the Stars, and then it slowly transitioned into me dressing up myself, singing with my dad, and that's where Suspicious Minds was my karaoke song of choice.
That was Elvis with Suspicious Minds. Tom Daley, you won your first trophy when you were 9 and you were still at primary school, obviously. Did diving set you apart from your classmates?
Yes. I mean, I think it started off, everyone was so happy and excited about the fact that I was a diver, and it was like kind of cool, and like I could do somersaults, and it was like an interesting skill to have. But it wasn't until like I went to the Olympics in Beijing that then how my classmates saw me started to be a little bit different, let's just say.
Tell me more about that.
I would have been, 14, and I was going into year 9 at school, and I had had the most amazing experience at the Olympic Games, and then lots of media wanted to be there to witness my first day back at school, and there was lots of people in year 7, they'd never met me before, and it started to become really weird, having to signing autographs at school and having photos with people at school. I was, thrown into this whole different world that I'd never experienced before, and people used to throw things at me, call me names. I mean, I had scissors thrown at me, I had rolls of tape, and in the field at lunchtime, these guys would come rugby tackle me to the floor and think it was funny, and to the point where I would start getting injured, and I just didn't feel safe anymore, and I felt scared and worried about going to school. It got to the point where I had to move school.
And you were offered a place, weren't you, at Plymouth College, a scholarship?
Yes.
How did that change things?
Honestly, I think to this day, it was one of the best things that have happened in my life. Obviously, there's been lots of amazing things, but the way that it changed the course of how I felt, and I automatically felt safe and at home, and there was a completely different environment, and people understood what it was to be a sports person, because there were lots of sports people at the school. And I remember just feeling so much happier that my diving took a completely different turn. By that point, I was 15 and I went to my first World Championships in a completely different headspace to what I had been the last few months. Felt so happy. And as my coach would say, I was like Peter Pan that could fly again. And I won my first world title.
At Plymouth College, you weren't just excelling at your chosen sport. I mean, you were a straight A student. Were you a perfectionist? You know, this exceptional drive and kind of singularity of mind and focus that you're describing, that's unusual for a teenage boy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I definitely was, still am a perfectionist, but I think there is something as well of growing up feeling slightly different and not feeling like the rest of your classmates and not feeling like you fit in. And there's something that's so different about you, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And there's something that's eating away at you that you want to do everything that you can to impress and be the best that you can be. So it, you know, you don't feel too different and alone. I also had it in the back of my head. What happens if diving goes completely wrong and I break my leg or I break my back and I can't dive anymore? I need to have something to fall back on.
I'm very interested in the idea of you sensing something different about yourself and thinking, right, okay, I need to get everything else right so that there's no chink in the armour, there's no kind of vulnerability that is visible there.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, as I was growing up, you know, I just figured that everybody, you know, liked everyone. Going through primary school, you know, boys would hang out with boys, girls would hang out with girls. I didn't realise that it wasn't socially acceptable, if you like, to, you know, like boys and girls. And it was a weird period of time for me. It wasn't until I went to secondary school that I started to realise, not everyone else is like me. And why am I different? Does that person think the same that I do, but is just better at hiding it or not showing it? And you feel less than. And I think, you know, to this day, those feelings of feeling less than and feeling different have been the real things that have given me the power and strength to be able to succeed in the other things that I've done, because you want to prove that you're not less than, and you want to prove that you are something and you are someone, and that I'm not going to disappoint everyone when they eventually were to learn my truth.
Job done there, I think. Tell me about your next disc, Tom.
So my next disc it's quite a bit of a funny story. Well, I think it's funny. It was after the first national championships that I'd won, and I had beaten people that were 8 years, 10, 12 years older than me. And we were on our way home, and this particular song came on, and one lyric, "Dry Your Eyes, Mate," came on in the car, and my dad burst out laughing, thinking it was absolutely hilarious, thinking about all of the older people that I had beaten and if they were crying. And we had this whole private joke about, you know, dry your eyes, mate, it'll be all right, don't worry, it's only someone 10 years younger than you just beaten you. Yeah, and that song then forever resonated with those moments with my dad where we had won.
The Streets with Dry Your Eyes. Tom Daley, in 2006, aged 12, at an international competition in Aachen in Germany, you'd completed 2 of your 3 dives from the 10-metre board, but on the way up the stairs to your third, you froze. What happened?
I had learned lots of new dives, and I had pushed myself to learn some of the hardest dives in the world at an age that was probably 6 or 7 years younger than what I should have been doing. And there was a couple of times in that period, because at 12 years old is when you start growing. And I started to grow, and all of my arms and my legs are starting to grow in weird ways. And like when I was getting into my tuck shapes and things like that, my legs wouldn't be where they used to be.
The centre of gravity is changing.
Yeah, like my whole spatial awareness was thrown off. And in the build up to that competition, there was a couple of moments where I went completely wrong, landed flat, hit the board. And I just got to a point where I was just so terrified and so freaked out. And I was going up to the board and I just like, I can't do it. There's no way that I can actually make myself jump from this board. And I come down and my coach at the time wasn't there. So it was the high performance director. And I went to him and I was like, I can't do it. And I was crying. And I think they thought that I was just being dramatic. So he was like, well, if you're going to pull out, you have to pull out yourself. And in this pool, I had to go up to the recorder's table and they were like, and representing Great Britain, Thomas Daley. And I went up to the recorder's table just crying. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And they pulled me out of the competition. And I remember like walking over and going up to the stands where my dad was and my mum, and just sitting there like crying. He was like, don't worry, it's okay. There's going to be more competitions. You're absolutely fine. It's all good. But little did I know that, you know, my dad had recently been given his cancer diagnosis just before going over to that competition. And yeah, that was where the beginning of a very tough 5 years in my life.
How much did you understand about what was going on with your dad at the time? Because you were just 12.
I had no idea what was going on with my dad, if I'm being completely honest. When we got home from that competition, he was like, oh, Tom, I'm doing a charity thing down the pub. I'm going to shave my head for charity. And I was like, oh, well, what are you doing? You can't shave off all your hair. That's crazy. But okay, this is something my dad would do, something nuts. And I remember he shaved his head and I thought he looked hilarious, like an egg. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is funny, but whatever. And then one day my dad didn't come home from work and my mum sat me, William and Ben, my brothers, down and was like, we're going to go and visit your dad now. And I was like, what do you mean visit my dad? Like, you know, he's going to come home from work, surely. Like, where is he? And then my mum explained that he was poorly. Didn't tell us exactly what, but I remember walking into the hospital and seeing my dad in a hospital bed with these massive big bandages around his head and looking really sick. And I was like, wait, I saw him yesterday. He just shaved his head for like, what's going on? And, you know, I was old enough to start putting things together of like, okay, we're on a cancer ward. I was like, but my dad doesn't have cancer. Like, well, that's really like, what? And I remember speaking to my grandma about, and I was like, does my dad have cancer? And she didn't know what to say. She cried, and then that was an answer enough. And later on, I started asking the questions, and it turned out he had had a brain tumour the size of a fist removed from his brain. And, you know, then it was the whole journey afterwards of recovering, the chemotherapy, the radiotherapy, and the 5 years that were to come afterwards.
And you were, of course, still in competition, still training and diving very hard. At just 13, you qualified for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. That is an adult-sized achievement, but
yes,
one experienced by a child. How do you remember it?
Now, looking back, qualifying for those Olympic Games, you know, they say things happen for a reason. But if I hadn't have gone to those Olympic Games in Beijing, my dad never would have seen me compete at an Olympic Games because he passed away before the London Olympics. So it was, again, one of those moments when I'd qualified. I remember looking up into the crowd. And whenever I would compete, my dad would have this big Union Jack flag. You would just know exactly where he was at any moment. And he'd come over to Beijing and he was bursting with pride and so excited about the fact that his little boy had, you know, we had achieved our dream, you know, 4 years earlier than I ever thought that I was going to be able to get there. I was going to go to the Olympics.
Tom Daley, it's time for your fourth. Tell me about this disc.
Well, this song in particular really is something that I had on so many different road trips on the way to training competitions that my dad would always play. And it really does remind me of the World Championships in 2009. It was a song that my dad once said, one day you will win a World Championship or an Olympic Games and you'll be on top of the world.
That was the Carpenters with Top of the World, reminding you, Tom Daley, of when you became world champion in 2009. It's very interesting to watch footage of you and your dad together, which I've done in the build-up to this, because while you can see the relationship between you and how incredibly close you obviously were, you were also very different.
Yeah, we were very different. And I think that was where we were able to balance each other out. I would, overanalyze things and be worried about things. And my dad would be able to rationalize things and make it seem like it was no big deal. And the way his outlook on life, and especially since his cancer diagnosis, I think he just decided that, you know what, life's short and I'm just going to live my life, be me, and I don't care what anyone else thinks about me as long as my family and friends love me. And after the 2009 World Championships, when we went into the press conference, my dad, I don't know how the security managed to allow him in, but he got in pretending to be a journalist to ask a question. And his question was if he could have a cuddle. And I remember I felt like I was dying inside. I was like, oh my goodness, my dad's come in, he's crying. It was embarrassing. But now looking back on it, I can't even imagine what it'd be like to have your son compete in such a high level and, be going through what he was going through with his health. And, there's lessons of not worrying about what anyone else, their opinion of you, and just being you is something that is such a valuable lesson.
Your dad had gone into remission after his operation and treatment in 2006, but in 2011 another tumour was found, and this time treatment wasn't possible. And he passed away when he was just 40. I mean, so young, a heartbreaking experience. How did you cope with it?
I mean, it was a horrible moment in my life. I was in Fort Lauderdale and I got a phone call from my mum saying, Tom, we're going to have to fly you home. And I was like, what do you mean fly me home? Dad's not very well. I was like, yeah, I know Dad's not very well, but I'm going to be home in a couple of weeks. And then it was that moment of realization, oh, this is that phone call. And then I get home and I see my dad in a hospital bed in the living room. He hadn't even been, conscious for, I don't know, I think it was 24 hours he hadn't been conscious for. And I walked into the room and I said, hi, Dad, it's me. I'm home. And for the first time in 24 hours, he opened his eyes, raised his fist into the air and was happy as anything to see me. And I remember it was just before my 17th birthday and I was sitting with him. Then all of a sudden he would have a good day where he'd be awake and everything would be great. And then I was like, oh my God, he's going to get better. He's going to get through this, because I was like, my dad's not going to die. He's invincible. He didn't think he was going to die. And I remember sitting next to him every day, practicing for my driving theory test. And he would sit there and help me and grunt, nod, whenever he could. And as the days went by, his condition started to deteriorate and, family and friends were always around and always coming by. And, I remember one of the last things he said to me was, do we have our tickets yet? And I was like, tickets for what? And he was like, oh, the London 2012 tickets, because I want to be right on the front row. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know how to say to him, I don't think, I couldn't say to him, you're not going to be around to be on the front row, Dad. And I think it was the next day, all of our family and friends were around and he had gone unconscious and I was holding his hand and, we were watching his chest, making sure he was still breathing. And then, I was holding his hand as he stopped breathing. And it wasn't until he had actually stopped breathing and that he was dead that I finally acknowledged that he wasn't invincible and life is so fragile. And he wasn't going to be there to teach me to drive, to go for my first pint at the pub, to be able to watch me win an Olympic medal, to see me get married, to see me have a kid, all those things. I mean, 40 years old is such a young age to die. And he had so much more to do. He had so much more to see for all of us, of his kids. I was 17, my brother was 15, and my younger brother was 12. That's such a young age to lose a parent. And yeah, like my world felt like it had come crashing down. And I was, you know, it was a big adjustment to not have your biggest cheerleader with you anymore.
Tom Daley, let's have some music. Tell me about your next disc.
Well, my next disc is a song that I remember growing up. It would be a song that would help me get to sleep, or it would be a song that my dad would play if I needed to calm down. And I think it's something that is still now something that I use with my son Robbie, and it is a peaceful, easy feeling.
And I want to sleep with you in the desert tonight.
The Eagles, Peaceful, Easy Feeling. Tom Daley, 18 months after losing your dad, you were achieving the dream that you and he had nursed all of those years, competing in the London 2012 Olympics, and you won bronze, an amazing achievement, especially given everything that you've been through. What was going through your mind at that moment?
It was a crazy experience going into London 2012. The pressure, the expectation, the fact that it was a home crowd, thousands of people watching in the audience, millions at home. And I just remember going into that last round of dives, walking to the end of the platform, looking down at the bottom of the pool, seeing the Olympic rings and seeing London 2012 and thinking, this is everything that I have dreamed of, everything I have worked towards from when I was a boy, age 9, had drawn a picture of me doing a handstand with London 2012 Olympic rings before it was even announced as the host nation. And I just knew that this is what I had dreamt of my whole life. And I remember hitting the water after that dive, and I felt like I could have been like a dolphin that had come out of the pool and like done a flip. I was there was so much adrenaline and excitement because I knew I had done enough to get a medal. And I remember running out of the pool and then going to my coach and just going to see my teammates. And it was an amazing euphoric sensation. And when, you know, it was confirmed that I had won a medal and my teammates all picked me up and we all were in the pool and my performance director jumped in with his phone, and it was a great night.
Everybody just losing their minds.
Yeah,
So I love
exactly,
watching that footage back. It's just, it's wonderful. A year later, there was more happy news for you. Your relationship began with your husband, Dustin Lance Black, the Oscar-winning screenwriter of the film Milk. It's interesting because you come from quite different worlds. I mean, Lance, he's 20 years older than you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how different was his world to the one that you'd been used to up till then?
Yeah,
Plymouth to LA is quite a jump, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. You know, I've learnt a lot from Lance and Lance has learnt a lot from me, but for starters, I never actually knew how old Lance was until a couple of months into our relationship, because it's not something that I notice. I never thought that I was ever going to fall in love with a man. That was something that caught me by surprise. And I just won an Olympic bronze medal. And the month afterwards, I was really sad about it. You know, didn't know if I wanted to dive anymore. I felt like I'd lost all purpose, like there was no end goal anymore. And also with losing my dad, there was that trauma that I'd been through too. And Lance had been through a similar thing, winning an Oscar and then having the downward slump that comes after it. And also he had recently lost his brother in a very similar fashion to how I lost my dad. So we just connected. I just felt safe. I felt happy. I felt comfortable, and something just clicked and felt right. I just knew. And I think, you know, when you go through so much at such a young age, it's hard to find another, 18, 19-year-old that has achieved the highs, experienced the lows, travel and all those things. So that was where I think Lance and I really connected.
So you're teaching him new things, he's teaching you new things. Are you developing new interests? I know that you were sketched by David Hockney not long ago.
Yes, I mean, there's been lots of different things that have been wild since then. I did a photography project at school, and David Hockney was one of the people that I researched and looked up to. And one of Lance's friends is an art dealer and knows David very well. And David invited us up for lunch one day and said in passing, "Oh, one day I'm going to draw you." And I was like, okay, yeah, cool, thinking he says that to everyone. And then, you know, came along after our wedding while we were on our honeymoon. He was like, "Right, do you want to do it?" And I was like, okay, fine. Turn up and Lance says, "Oh, I'll be back in a little bit." And when Lance comes back, when he walked into the room, he sees David Hockney, you know, sketching me and then hanging off the easel my underwear. And he is drawing me nude, and Lance was like, "Oh, wow, okay, David, I leave you here for a couple of hours and you've already got my husband undressed." But, you know, when David Hockney says that's how he wants to draw you, you do it. So, yeah, that was definitely an experience.
Time for some music, Tom Daley. Tom Daley, the press interest in you has been unremitting since your teens, and you have had to do your growing up very much in public. You do share a great deal of your life on your YouTube channel. What do you say to people who might accuse you of oversharing?
I think lots of people might think that I overshare, but I don't think about social media in a way that, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. I post things that I'm thinking, feeling, and things I think would be cool, and things that I'd love to share with my friends and family. And, you know, that's something that we've been very conscious about, making a decision of, you know, privacy around our son. But, you know, at the same time, we wanted to shine light on the fact that we are a family. And I think that's been the biggest thing that has ruffled feathers, is the fact that Lance and I are now parents.
You chose to go down the route of commercial surrogacy in order to become parents, and some people do have difficulty with that idea. How do you respond to that criticism?
Yeah, there's people that don't necessarily get it. There's so many children around the world that need adopting. Why didn't you adopt? And then you ask the question to any couple that are able to have kids naturally, like, why don't they adopt? There's plenty of kids in the world that need adopting, and there's something special about having a biological connection to your child. And, you know, we've always just wanted a family more than anything in the whole world. And again, with surrogacy, lots of people think it's just for same-sex couples, and actually like 70% or more is straight couples that have had some kind of illness or fertility issues, and they need someone to help them create their family. And, you know, we love our surrogate more than anything in the whole world. She's so great, and we are in contact with her, you know, nearly every day, and she will be a part of Robbie's life, because we believe that honesty and transparency about the whole process is very important.
You do have a very prominent public profile, and in April this year at the Australia Games, you appealed to Commonwealth countries to decriminalise homosexuality. There are 37 where it's illegal. What made you decide to do that?
You know, I just felt so lucky to have just won the Commonwealth Games with my synchro partner, Dan. And I was sat having lunch with my husband, my mum and my grandparents. And, you know, everyone was just celebrating the fact that we'd just won. And there was no worry, no fear about going back to the UK and getting thrown in prison, or getting, you know, some countries with death sentences. And I think, you know, being able to just truly be me and truly be who I am, standing on that diving board without fear of ramifications of what might happen, living openly as I am, I just felt so lucky. And I was like, I can't believe the amount of countries that still criminalise LGBT people for being who they are. Lots of people that aren't LGBT or Q don't understand what it's like to be born this way. You know, lots of people think it's a lifestyle choice, and it's not a lifestyle choice, because if you were to choose, you would choose the easy route of not being different. You don't want to stand out like that. Whereas I love who I love, and there's lots of people around the world that love who they love. And, you know, at the end of the day, love is love. And being able to share personal stories is a way to be able to change people's hearts. And I think if you can change people's hearts about an issue, that's how you can start changing people's minds and the way that they think about it.
I think that we expect a lot of our sports stars. We expect them to be diplomatic, to shrug off criticism, to assess their victories and defeats quite dispassionately. And, you know, this is something that you can do, and then you're choosing to go further and talk about your personal life. How difficult has it been to develop the ability to do that and to communicate in that way?
Yeah, it can be difficult because you know that there's lots of people that are going to criticise everything or anything that you do. But I just want to be able to help leave behind some kind of... Because, for example, you know, I've competed in Russia and on the podium had like a rainbow pin badge on my tracksuit. And because there's lots of people in lots of countries that are growing up feeling different, feeling less than, feeling like an outsider. And feeling like an outsider can be dangerous. And I think being able to give a kid that sees someone on the screen living openly as who they are, and knowing that people are respectful and like happy, and like there is hope that people will get through it and people will be able to live life openly and happily, and they won't feel the way they feel forever, I think is something that is quite powerful to be able to do.
Time for some more music, Tom. Tell me about this next disc.
My next song is a song that I remember from when I was a kid. It's something that my dad would sing to me. And every night while I'm rocking Robbie to sleep, and it is a song that I definitely sing because he's my little angel.
Shaggy, featuring Ravon, Angel. Tom Daley, you are now a dad.
Yeah.
It's almost a cliche to ask how it's changed your perspective, but can't really avoid it because it just does, I think.
Yeah, it's been the most amazing, magical experience. And every day I feel so incredibly lucky to wake up and see our little Robbie Ray in his little bed, and he's just the cutest little thing. Going to training, I want to make sure that I do everything I can to make the most of every single second that I'm away from him, because I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can do, you know, because if I'm going to be away from him, I want to make sure it's damn worth it. So, and then when I get home, I can be completely distracted away from diving because he's going to be there and he's going to be screaming, pooping, and, you know, all of the above.
Robbie's named after your dad, isn't he? I want to know how your mum's getting on, though. How's Debbie enjoying being a grandmother?
My mum, Nana Debs, absolutely. She's
Nana, because that's a key decision going into the process.
She knew she wanted to be Nana.
Right.
Yeah, she didn't want to be grandma. She wanted to be Nana Debs. So she comes all the way up from Plymouth, bless her. And she's even bought a little toiletry bag and her own toothbrush. So she's basically moving in on the weekends.
I was just going to say, gradually. And you're at the grand old age of 24 now, preparing for your 4th Olympic Games in Tokyo. What's your definition of success going into that challenge?
I think now my whole perspective on Tokyo has changed. If you had asked me last year, it was all about, I need to win a gold medal. This is the most important thing. And you know what? There are bigger things than Olympic gold medals. My Olympic gold medal is Robbie.
What advice would you give to young people who watch you dive about what they need to do to be successful, what it takes?
I think if I could give my younger self a piece of advice, I think it would be useful for anyone in any field, is pay attention to the smallest details. And, you know, for me in diving, it's as little things like I used to be really scruffy when I was little, and I didn't point my feet as much as I should have. And now, as I get older, I realise I need to learn to point my feet if I'm going to get the 9.5s and 10s. And those little things, if I focus on the details when I was younger, would make me now as the granddad of diving slightly easier.
All right then, Grandad, let's have some more music. What are you going to play us next?
This song instantly takes me back to London 2012. And imagine this song blasting in my earphones and the adrenaline high that I was going through when I was walking out onto poolside for the men's 10 metre final in the London 2012 Olympic Games.
Avicii and Levels. So, Tom Daley, it's nearly time for you to set sail to your island. What do you think would be the biggest challenge for you there?
Oh, gosh. I am a very social person, so being there on my own, I think, will be the biggest struggle because I love having people around. I do a Monday night dinner club where I cook for 12 to 16 people every week. So for me, I would definitely miss just having people around.
You don't go empty-handed, of course. All castaways will find the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare waiting for them, and you can choose another book to take with you. What will yours be?
Well, the book that I probably have the most memories and I feel like is the biggest achievement for me was that the first proper book I'd say that I read was Harry Potter. The first Harry Potter. I remember reading it with my grandma and with my mum and with my dad, and there was like a real group effort to get me through this book. And then from then on, I was just like a massive Harry Potter fan.
So Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah. I wish I could take the full works, like the Shakespeare of J.K. Rowling.
You had a little bit of identification with Harry Potter because of your scar on your forehead,
yes.
I believe.
I've hit my head on the diving board twice, once on the front and once at the top. And I used to dress up for Halloween as Harry Potter when I was younger because I had my scar on my head, so I only needed to add an extra little squiggle rather than doing the full scar.
So you can do some light cosplay on the island.
Exactly.
While reading the book.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. You can also take a luxury. What's yours going to be?
Well, I would like to say I'd like to take my whole kitchen, including all cookware, but we can't do that. That's a little bit too much.
I mean, I'm new to this. It's my first day. I've really got to stick to the rules. I think a full kitchen is a stretch.
Yes. If I had my oven with the hobs and the cooker itself, then we're good.
Okay, I can do you an oven.
Okay, great. Well, we'll do an oven. And
this may be the hardest part. I'm going to have to ask you which of the 8 discs you would choose if you could keep only one.
That's a tough one. I do think How Long Will I Love You will still be one of the happiest memories of the wedding day, so I think I'd have to take that one.
Tom Daley, thank you very much for sharing your Desert Island Discs with us.
Thank you.
It was great having Tom Daley as my first castaway, and he's actually the first diver to be sent to our desert island. There are lots of Olympians and Paralympians in the Desert Island Discs back catalogue though. Kirsty interviewed ice skaters Jane Torville and Christopher Dean in 2014, American sprinter Michael Johnson in 2011, and athlete Denise Lewis in 2012. And the wheelchair racer Dame Tanny Gray-Thompson was Sue Lawley's guest in 2001. Swimmer Rebecca Adlington, like Tom, was a member of Team GB at the Beijing Olympics in 2008. Kirsty cast her away in 2015.
The youngest, as you say, of 3 sisters. I think that's quite an interesting place in the pecking order to be. How was it for you?
It's one of those things that you can tell now that we're a little bit older, the different characteristic that we've all had. From me being the youngest, I'm a little bit probably more laid back and a bit more carefree than my sisters. And my sisters are just, they're so protective. Whereas I think as the baby, you don't feel as protective, and you just kind of like, oh yeah, they're my big sisters, they'll get through anything, and you kind of just have that attitude, and it just makes you a bit more laid back. But they hated me beating them in swimming. We all swam. It was our family thing that we used to go to club together, and we used to go at weekends, and they just did not like me beating them.
Are your parents sporty?
Not at all. No, not at all.
I'm so surprised.
Yeah, no, they like watching sport, but they're not sporty people at all. We're a dead small town in Mansfield, but we were very lucky that in this tiny place, we haven't even got a hotel yet. We've got 2 swimming pools.
The swimming pool was just round the corner. It was just a walk from your house. Was that why they took their 3 girls there? Because it was something to do and it was close by?
Something that you can do together as a family swimming. I think other sports, like you can't play rugby with them from 3, can you? Or other sports, I think it's quite difficult for them to be active. And even when, like my mum tried me with ballet and all that, but they couldn't get involved in that. And yet on the weekends, mum and dad could get in the pool with us, and we could actually do it as a family and go together. I don't look back on my career and remember all the hard times. I remember times having splashing about pretending to be a mermaid with my mum and dad.
Do you remember getting rid of your armbands and doing doggy paddle? Was that a moment, or?
I can remember being on holiday, and my mum says that was the most terrifying moment of her life, that she was blowing up the armbands. And me being the baby, I think because you see your older sisters and they could fully swim, they were fine in the pool. My mum was blowing up the armbands, that I just ran, not having any lessons, I just ran into the pool.
Oh my goodness.
And my uncle, who can't swim, he's terrified of water, jumped in the pool after me, and I ended up saving him at 3. I was just like, I could float. I was
You
actually,
could just do it.
And then after that, my mum was like, right, she's going into lessons. I just had no fear.
Rebecca Adlington speaking to Kirsty Young. Join me next week for another Desert Island Discs Archive Classic.